Hey everyone, sorry I'm late to start the stream here. Had to update my OBS, and I'm displaying the OBS itself. So that's a fun infinite loop. Let's go over to Salesforce. Okay, so this week I'm gonna pull up my checklist. Um, we're gonna be talking about a pretty interesting thing that we've developed to pass a Salesforce file over to Slack. And why would you do this? Okay, so you can think about in Salesforce, maybe you have a quote or a proposal or some contract in this example, we'll do a statement of work that you need to both add to Salesforce, but also send over to your team in Slack to have a discussion around. And so I'm going to show a quick demo of how this will work, and then we'll go work on the flow itself. I'm a little limited on time today, so I'm actually going to, instead of doing it from scratch, I'm going to show you the flow element that we used to accomplish this. Okay, so let's go ahead and show it working first. Let me create a new project from scratch so you can see what this looks like. So we'll call this Document Force. It's my made-up company. Let's see. I just want to make sure my audio and stream is working. Yeah, okay. Okay, Document Force Phase 2, we'll call it. And this is some project in Salesforce. This is a custom object I created. So again, the use case here will be we create a project where someone's created a SOW. We want to attach that to Salesforce so it's a record, but then we want to have the team discuss it in Slack and then save all that info back to Salesforce using our components. So the benefit here is that you get the ability to have that file synced, ready to view and consumable within the Slack side, and then all of the meat and of the conversation is in Slack, so we want to capture that as well, so we all know what's been happening with this SOW. So you can imagine similar things with contracts or quotes or proposals, that sort of thing. Okay, so now we'll just fill out this record here. Doesn't really matter what these dates are. I'm just filling it out. Okay. So we got a new project, and I got a new button here called Post File to Slack. What this is going to do is create a little window here that says upload the SOW to Salesforce and Slack. We're going to pick a file, and then we're going to enter the default message to send. This is going to send to a channel that is the generic project channel. So this is pretty common where like a whole bunch of projects are being discussed and then they thread on the individual file. So let's go ahead and upload our file. This is using the Salesforce file upload element, which I'll show you in a second. And there it is. There's our upload. And then we want to maybe post a message. So we'll say, hey, please look at this SOW for Document Force and discuss. Okay, then I'll hit next. So Central will pick this up using our new file upload element and post a Slack message. So we have an unread here in our projects channel. And there's our statement of work waiting for us. So this has been actually uploaded to Slack. So it's a file on the Slack side. You should, as you know, Slack's file limits are much higher than Salesforce. So maybe you do want to discuss this here and not upload it to Salesforce. We can handle that later. Okay, so please look at this SOW. And then we're going to have a little discussion about it. We'll say, looks good, but what about X? Did you think of Y? Otherwise, let's go. Some discussion around this, right? We also did an update to link this particular thread to a record in Salesforce. So we've heard this a few times now. We've recently implemented it where, as you know, Central previously was doing channel and record linkage. And that's good because you can have a very focused discussion in a channel and link that to Salesforce. But you might have a thread within a general channel like this projects channel. It's many different projects are being discussed, but you want to encapsulate the details of the thread to Salesforce as well. Companies work differently with Slack, and there's no one right solution. So really excited to have this feature enabled. So what we do is we come to the more actions. We find the header of the thread. This is the thread. This is the starting conversation for this thread. We come into more actions, say link to Salesforce, and it pops this dialog that says, okay, which Salesforce record? We do a recent or search. So recent records are ones that your user has recently touched in Salesforce. So we should see, here's an opportunity. Here's this project phase 2 we just did. Or you can start typing document force. This works against all standard and custom objects. And it doesn't match based on those search parameters. This would be like doing a search for the same thing in Salesforce. And now we can come in and find our project. Here it is, phase 2. And then this dialog says, okay, which thread? Or what do you want to name this? Because if you recall, we'll show you in a second, the central Lightning Web Component will show the channel name, but there's no name for a thread, right? Slack doesn't name threads. So we want to give it a name so we can have others find it. So we'll say discussing Sal for document force. We'll hit link, and on the Salesforce side, we will see if we reload that we have our linked conversation. Here it is, discussing, and we can see the conversation thread, and then we can hop in more messages, thanks, which will of course pop in the thread. So we'll pop over to Slack. We got our new reply there, and this is keeping track of all that threaded discussion. It's linking the thread to the Salesforce record. And we have this new icon. This is actually showing better when you have the Lightning Web Component stretched out. So you can see we have a thread symbol for threads, the hashtag for public channels, the padlock for private channels in Slack, and then archive channels, of course. Okay, so how did we do this? Let's go take a look. This flow is a screen flow. Let's see, send file to Slack. Now, how I did this was, this is just a screen flow type of flow. And the first thing we do is you got to create this variable called record ID. I discovered that you just need it as available for input from an action on the record. I'll show you that in a second. So what happens here is really funny. If you have this variable named this way, record capital ID as a, I'm assuming you could do this for multiple files. There's nothing that's stopping us from doing it either. I just wanted a simple demo flow. So we did one document. Then it asks for content document IDs and content version IDs as a text collection variable. So you got to go create a text collection variable and then set it here. I left disabled and hover text blank. Here's that record ID. So if you set this, it's going to save the uploaded file to the Salesforce file for that particular record. That's how it works. There's no out of box sort of explaining how it works, but that's how I did search around last night on how to do that. And then you put a collection variable for file names. So that means, if you uploaded many file names and many documents, you would store them in this collection variable. regardless, you still have to use a collection variable, even if you set this allow multiple files to false. So there you go. Then the next piece is just a little nicety I put in there, which is having a new variable to pass in called var message, which we will send over to the Slack side as part of a, here's your file, and telling the team what's up with that. The reason I did that is because in the future we will have our file upload element to Slack. Not right now, it's very basic. You just give it a content document version ID, content document version ID, and which channel it's going to. We're thinking about updating our other element, which is the send Slack message element. Let me show you. We're thinking about including another section for files, post a file, included and buried in that message. So that's coming. So now you have to send 2 messages. That's how it works today. But we'll soon have that available to have in one single shot. Okay, so we set this one is simply setting our variable message from the message sent to channel screen component. Let me show you this. This confused me a little bit. If you find under the screen component section, this is what is the thing that gets filled out that will send over and set that message. So that gets set in that element or in that component, and then you got to set it to a variable so we can pass it into our element to send to Slack. Okay, now this one is also grabbing the content version IDs from that string component and setting it to our doc version IDs. Now we use that in this loop. The only reason I have the loop is because, remember, I have a collection and not a single content document ID. Unfortunately, I have to loop through a single row of a collection variable to grab that single ID. Oh well, it is what it is. Okay, so we're looping on doc version IDs, and then we will be setting our single doc version ID off the current item, and then we will send this to our file upload. Okay, you can imagine I can do this multiple times using our element. We can send multiple files over in the loop, but we're not. In this case, it's just a single message. So here we go. In this case, it says this is our send file to Slack element. Like I said, this is our first version of this. Very basic. I'm hard coding the channel ID. How did I do that? I could use a variable. There's nothing special here. I could use a variable from the flow. And what's really nice is to use that picker that we have developed in the other elements. So again, the kind of first version of this, we're very much a iterate type of shop here. Okay, so we have the channel ID. Oh, how did I get that? In Slack, here's a little trick. If you go not to the app, but rather to the web client and pick a channel, you'll see in the URL, this part of the URL is the channel. It starts with a C, so this text is the channel ID. Just so you know, this is the team ID that starts with a T. So this is only accessible through the web client because of the URL parameters or the URLs it constructs. Okay, so we could come back in. That's how I pasted in this one. That's going to our projects channel, and we'll hit done. Then I want to send a message to the team as well, right? So here's that var message that was in the screen flow. No buttons. So again, how that looks on the Slack side is here's the screen message that I popped in, and then here is the file itself. Okay, so that's how I did the example that we just showed. Let me just check the stream, if there's any questions. Feel free to post them. I'm happy to answer any questions. I treat this like an office hours after I get through the sort of example. So what are we going to do in the future? You can imagine some cool things like including some buttons here to maybe approve this document. I showed that a couple weeks ago, sending a Salesforce approval using Slack and those buttons. You can find that in our YouTube. I've been saving these live streams to our YouTube for the how-to part. So you can go in there, check that out. So we can attach, you can imagine send a quote over, and then put a button on there that says approve or reject. And then that saves the Salesforce, and then the person maybe regenerates the quote and sends it back over. And then one question I have been asked is, does this allow versioning? So as you know, in Salesforce world, Salesforce files have a content and then the content version. They can go through multiple versions and keep on that same content document. So imagine you have version 1 of a contract, for example, and then you edit it, and then you want to have version 2 be the most recent, but saved to the same parent record of the original content document. You just have a new version of it. Salesforce does a really nice job of that. And they've been pushing Salesforce files, that's what that's called, for a few years now, instead of attachments. It's really nice. This is on the Slack world, it's a single document. You can't version this. There's no updating this. You just post in a new, you could delete the message and then post a new one in. But we could play some interesting things like, having a button that fires a platform event that does something in Salesforce, which shoots back over to Slack and posts a new update. So, yeah, in a way, Slack's a little behind on that file versioning concept, but I think this is a pretty good use case. So, unless there's any questions from the stream here, let me just double check. Nope, doesn't look like it. I'll wrap it up for today, and we will see you next week.